Matt, thanks for joining us today. Matt, you and I, about 3 years ago, started a little bit of a journey together, and we started to kind of evolve into what's changing in enterprise sales. And is it the typical model that's out there? Is that going to work forever? And I hypothesized back then that there are signals in the marketplace, which are more prevalent now, that there might be a different approach we might have. So when you go back to those early days, what do you think that's changed in the market? What have you been seeing, and what did you detect 3 years ago that said, "Boy, as a sales leader, I have to have a different perspective on things"?
Yeah, great question, Jody, and happy to be here. Look, I think when we look at the market 3 years ago to today, it's a very different looking market to start with. There's a lot more volatility in the market, and when we've got that global macroeconomic volatility, that usually means extra scrutiny on investment decisions. So, in a net new hunting sales environment, we sort of picked up on that. We saw more stakeholders, more board level, more PE firm involvement in financial decisions that historically would have been a CHRO or a CFO signing off. And I think the way in which companies are not just making decisions, but evaluating vendors in the first place has also dramatically changed as well. I think these days companies can get a pretty good feel for the market with one click of the button using their LLM of choice, and do a lot of that software vendor research without even engaging software vendors. And obviously that's only as good as the public information that's out there and available. So we sort of saw that and recognized the need that we don't know all accounts where we don't have any incumbency, right? We can do all the outbound demand gen heroics as we possibly can. We can run all these automated email marketing sequences and hope that someone bites. But chances are there's other companies out there that are engaged in these accounts, whether they're existing software vendors, advisory firms, consultants, etc., that have the ears of the executives, that know what their company OKRs are, know what the priorities are, potentially know what their challenges and shortfalls or shortcomings of their existing tech stack are as well. And they can bring us, almost catapult us forward from an account research level without us having any direct interaction. So I think that was a big turning point, was just this sort of realization that, hey, if we can start to join forces with these firms that have influence in these sort of cold net new accounts, we're probably a much higher chance of earning the business down the road if we can leverage those relationships.
So, Matt, with that background, did you have kind of that moment? Was there something that happened, an event that said, as a sales leader, I really need to start. My thoughts are there's change. This has validated the change. Was that something that happened to you? Can you recall that?
Yeah, we're always in the business of continuous improvement, so we're always looking for ways to refine around the edges. But when you inherit a quota uplift that's north of many, many millions in a net new territory where you sell a bunch of deals the year prior and those deals and accounts come out of your territory, you've got to do a hell of a lot more with less. And so we looked at that and said, hey, if we do things incrementally slightly better this next fiscal year, we're going to fall short. So we need to look at sort of fundamentally new ways of working that could open up new sources of pipeline for us, that could accelerate and advance existing in-flight opportunities through to deal closure much faster, and also drive a higher win rate. We call it conversion rate, but drive that higher conversion rate of competitive deals. And I think a key turning point for us was the emergence of our partnership with AWS. Now, historically, we have sold through the office of the CHRO, and they've been a great persona for us, great friends to us over the years. We look at CIOs, CTOs, and historically they've been there at the end to support some integration or security questions, but we haven't really lent into that stakeholder. And we very quickly discovered that AWS is all over that executive. They know exactly every IT project that's on the horizon, all their front office revenue generating apps that may be running on their infrastructure. And for us, it was a bit of a blind spot. So we looked at that as an opportunity to strengthen our account knowledge of in-flight pursuits where they may be able to leverage AWS. We looked at it as a competitive differentiator. AWS more motivated to work with Workday. We're not an infrastructure provider. We don't have any sort of competitive overlap. And then sort of towards the tail end of deals, we looked at transacting through AWS Marketplace as a bit of a glide path through approvals. AWS was already vetted from a security, infosec, compliance, audit standpoint. The billing infrastructure was all there. Finance was familiar with them. So we looked at that as an avenue to compress that sort of security and contracting evaluation due diligence process towards the late stage of deals. And we saw that winning momentum, right? So, we win one through AWS, reps hear about it. They want to learn more. I think my team in New York at the time did 4 of the first 6 deals with AWS globally. So we had a really great sort of head start, and then it just compounded from there in the best way possible. So, and then that's just one strategic ally. There's obviously many other partners that have influence within the accounts that we're selling into. But that was one that we were able to sort of tap into and really drive more deals, drive faster deals, and drive a higher win rate.
So, Matt, beyond the AWS story, can you share other kind of associated partner stories where these partner strategy really help you win a deal and actually prove that bringing those partners in earlier and using their influence help you close a deal?
Yeah, I think for sure. And look, gone are the days of sort of the gory ERP sales cycles where one vendor's trying to do it all in an account. And I think much more in line with Gartner's composable ERP strategy. We see these alliance-led sales being much more of the norm these days. And there's countless examples we've talked about sort of the hyperscaler relationship with AWS and others. I look at vendors like Salesforce. We often looked at companies that moved to Salesforce recently as a lead indicator that they may be coming to market soon for either HR or finance as that next cloud iteration and cloud evolution for them. And Salesforce is a big partner of ours. They're a customer of ours. We're a customer of theirs. So we would look at that and say, hey, if they've just moved all their customer data to the cloud and their CRM with Salesforce, that's often the front end to an order to cash process. Let's look at that ERP transformation as that next opportunity. We also looked at it from advisory partners that would often give us the tip off around SpinCo or M&A transactions. They're often quite quick cycles where a company is being spun out of an existing organization. They may have a TSA in place that necessitates them moving off the parent's systems really, really quickly. And there's financial pressure to do so. So quick evaluation and quick project timelines. And I think that's super valuable because a lot of that is not necessarily super public. So when you have a tier 1 GSI or a boutique advisory supporting that, potentially getting an early tip off of, hey, there might be something coming here could mean the difference between a win and a loss. And then I look at the third-party ISVs that fill a gap in our solution suite or do something complementary where we have direct, proven certified integrations. And that sort of better together story is better to take to prospective customers to say, hey, we do all these things with our proven partners around the edges. We do even more. Here's the broader value that we can deliver back to the organization. We can de-risk, we can add more benefits and strengthen that total ROI. And I think that sort of broader picture is a very different scenario to where we were looking at sort of selling 5-10 years ago.
So, Matt, really great insight. And I know you've been at Workday for a number of years, right? So you understand this top of mind, but now you have new reps coming on board every quarter. How do they learn? How do they all have to come to you? Are you the source of this? Or how do we get these reps up to speed on this, what is really extremely complex?
Good question, Jody. So yes, we are growing healthily. We are hiring a number of new sellers. That's a great thing. We do have phenomenal onboarding processes here. So I'm very fortunate that we've got a lot of existing infrastructure and processes and great enablement teams in place. I do think it's a core responsibility of any sales leader to, be that drum beater of the key principles and the key behaviors that you want to instill across your sales force. So for me, that notion of coalition selling and how do you leverage the ecosystem around you to, again, find more deals, advance them faster, sell higher, win at a higher clip. That's core to what we do, right? As quota carrying sellers and selling leaders. So look, as much as you want to beat the drum, there's probably a few things that I continue to coach, even for my more tenured sellers. And one is, don't work with partners to do the whole account mapping and it goes into the black hole. So, don't say, I'll send you my account list. They promise to look through every single account, tell you all the executives that they know, and then 3 months later, nothing happens, goes into the black hole. Pick those strategic few where you've both got relationships there, or one or the other does. Start with that as a starting point, and then build the momentum from there. Don't let it get too big for you that it gets put in the too hard basket and gets forgotten about. I think the other is just behaviorally, it's a notion of trust, right? So often sellers are control freaks. They want to control their own destiny. They want to quarantine as many folks out of the sale as possible so that they can monitor the success and the steps themselves. But at the end of the day, the sort of the arms around alliance selling style versus the elbows up is much more effective. So it's just that continual reminder that sellers need to embrace those around them that have influence within these accounts, whether they're incumbents or advisors or whatnot. There's value to be had there if you are managing that ecosystem effectively. And then I think, as we look out to the future of enterprise sales, I mean, no software vendor these days is avoiding the topic of AI. And the notion of interoperability is probably more important than it's ever been. So if you're a tech vendor and you're not engaging with the likes of Salesforce, AWS, Databricks, Snowflake, and many, many more, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. And so I think for us, it's that coaching that you can run all the right steps in your sales methodology. You can have your perfectly built org chart with all your executive influences. But if you're neglecting that sort of the third column around partners, you're leaving yourself some blind spots in the deal there.
So, Matt, if I go through my sales experience, there's always those times that you get that cold RFP, a brand new account that you're really not familiar with. And the typical thing is you fill out the RFP and you kind of throw it and you kind of hope that for the best, right? But you're right, everyone's so much more sophisticated now. So when you think about those net new accounts, how does this whole multi-partner strategy play into how you engage those accounts?
Great question, Jody. And look, I've led net new sales teams for a decade now across multiple countries, and it's a challenge, right? As we look at companies that come to market where maybe an RFP lands in our lap that we had no visibility to, no influence over, it's a challenge to determine whether we want to participate in that RFP in the first place. I often draw the analogy to certainly to our new sellers, Jody, that if you're looking at a cold prospective customer account where we don't have any real meaningful history of engagement, compare them to someone that's been maybe locked inside for 10 years. They haven't had Wi-Fi. Let's assume they haven't had TV. All they know is status quo and working with the incumbent vendors that they've had, right? And we see this a lot, right? A company comes to us, they've been on PeopleSoft for 20, 30 years. All they know is PeopleSoft and the way that they've used it. If you take that analogy, someone comes outside for the first time in 10 years, let's say there's a tourist that walks past and says, hey, I'm looking for directions to the nearest grocery store. How does that person know, right? All they know is what they've been doing inside for 10 years. They don't know about the new highway. They don't know about Google Maps. They don't know you could take an Uber there. Maybe they don't even know that DoorDash exists and you can have groceries delivered to your front door in the first place. And same sort of goes with prospects, right? Someone knows why they're coming to market. We get a lot of RFPs that are, 500, 600 functional requirement line items, very, very detailed. Can it do this? Can it do that? How many green boxes does it have, etc. And you can read all those functional requirements. None of them tell you why a company is going to market. Is it a modernization improvement? Have they had compliance issues? Is it an integration issue? Is it just that it's got a lousy UI and they need to drive better adoption? Is there an AI strategy? Right? These are the key things that would influence, do we think we're a good fit for this company, or is this better off going to someone else? Now, we may not know that because they're a prospect and we haven't had a history of engagement there, but someone does, right? Whether that's incumbents, third-party advisors, management consultants, you name it, right? Someone knows what's top of mind for that organization, what their key OKRs are, maybe what's broken today that is, number one issue for the CEO or board. So for us as sellers, it's incumbent to work with anyone that can give us some of those dynamics, right? And to look at our partner ecosystem to say who may know someone in the account. Is there someone that was a former customer at a different company? Is there a third-party consultant that we work with regularly that can maybe give us a little bit of a scoop on this RFP? Because outside that, most of us have been through cold RFPs where we submit a phenomenal response. We spend 2 weeks doing it. We get shortlisted, and then we're too expensive, or they had their vision lies somewhere else. And again, I think a lot of that starts pre-RFP. So sweat the ecosystem around you. Look for those insights from those that know, and I think we'll all be off to a better direction ahead.
So Matt, as we wrap, there's many CROs on this call and listening to this video, and they might be smaller companies, they might be new to their role. Considering this whole multi-partner world that we live in, what is some advice you'd give as we close our discussion today?
Yeah, look, I think in the new AI world where every seller is, using their own LLM of choice, assume that every prospective customer that you're trying to sell into is doing the same. So they're doing that analysis of your capabilities before your first engagement, and assume that probably your biggest differentiators are not super public, right? We keep ours pretty closely guarded so that our competitors can't replicate them. And assume that then means that prospective customers aren't fully aware of what those differentiators are as well. Now, how do we get those differentiators in the hands of your prospects? It's usually through those that have the existing influence, existing incumbency in your accounts, right? Whether that's hyperscalers, consultants, third-party advisors, ISVs, tech allies, etc. So I think look at how to better embrace the ecosystem around you. That can be from looking at garnering better account knowledge, to identifying joint opportunities to work together, to accelerating deals through to closure, or winning at a higher clip. But a key part of that is you also need to factor in the supporting infrastructure to support that process and the people behind it. It's very hard to do on a Google sheet. So think about how you can make that a scalable endeavor. As we look ahead, I think there's going to be continued investor scrutiny. There's going to be a continued focus on risk. And I think sellers are going to have less and less times with prospects. Prospects are going to do all that account research with them beforehand. They're going to continue to sort of fact check comments made throughout a sales cycle using their own AI tools. So, operate with precision, but use those technology, use the partner influence to be really precise in how you manage and proactively squash objections before they hit you. And then I think lastly, as we look at the new AI world, that notion of interoperability, right? I think really consider who are your software allies, what organizations can you partner up with, where does it make sense to go in sort of arms up as opposed to elbows up? And I think that's going to be the new world, right? Is proven integrations, interoperability, and trust in the data across your agentic AI technology capabilities.